think we scheduled this post-game show. I initially put it in for 4:15 because I didn't know how long the game was going to go. Once the game ended, I changed it to 4:05. Oh, I got the wrong mic setting. Let's fix that. There, it should sound a little bit better. I changed it to 4:05, but it's 4:02 or something like that, and we're just going to get started because I don't really want to sit here and think about that ending to the game, try and think of the perfect thing to say, the perfect way to start this to start this post-game show. I want to come in with a hot take or something like that. We're just going to get started and we're just going to talk. And we're going to talk about this game. Pitt loses to Notre Dame 55-54 on a buzzer beater foul call. A buzzer beater foul. A game where let's check the whole stats here on this game. A game where there were 24 fouls called in the entire game, 12 on each team. So neither team, there were only 19 free throws attempted. So a game where the referees let them play all game long. They let the physicality go. They let guys bump and bang and play tough all game long. They get Zach Austin on some ticky-tacky you-know-what with 0.5 seconds in a tie game. And I know all the hockey purists out there will say, well, you got to call it the same way. If it's a penalty in game one, it should be a penalty in the playoffs, or you don't call it differently. I don't forget that. Okay, there's 0.5 seconds left to go in in an elimination game in a tournament setting with a tie game, and it's that ticky-tacky little touch. It was hardly even a foul. It was questionable as a foul call at any point in the game, and certainly in that situation with less than 1 second left to play, it's not a foul. All right, Austin's arm barely touched Davis's arm. They were both going up, and Austin's arm was going straight up. He might have wrapped around Davis's arm a little bit. Not enough to merit a call in the first 0.5 seconds of the game, and not enough to merit a call in the final 0.5 seconds of the game. Not when you're deciding a tied game in a tournament elimination. And I hate to say that it should be a foul no matter what, whether they're playing Sam Houston State in the first minute or they're playing Notre Dame in the ACC tournament in the final 0.5 seconds. But that is a crap call. Okay? Like, that is a bad call to make. It's not a foul. It's not a foul, and it's definitely not a foul in that situation. In that situation, you let the clock go. Unless somebody does something egregious, then you call it. But that wasn't egregious. How do you call that foul? I don't get it. And it overshadows so many things we could be complaining about right now. Like, we could complain about a whole lot. We could complain about, Ishmael Leggett's play in this game. We could complain about, Pitt's performance overall. We could complain about how they shot 4 of 22 from 3 and just kept chucking up 3-pointers. We could complain about Jalen Lowe stepping on the baseline, with how many seconds left? Less than 20 seconds left to go in a tie game where Pitt's got possession and Jalen Lowe steps on the baseline and gives the ball back to Notre Dame. Well, we could complain about all of those things. We could complain about different calls and different decisions and personnel and all of this. But how, this is one of these games, and we often do this in sports. Like, what happens at the very end is the thing we talk about the most. Well, we just focus on that last thing, even though the game was decided over the course of 9.5 seconds, or no, 39 minutes, 59 seconds, 39 minutes and 59.5 seconds. That's what decided this game. It wasn't decided in the 0.5, or at least it shouldn't have been decided in the final 0.5. But because the officials decided to blow the whistle there, because they decided to have Tay Davis shoot free throws in a tie game with less than 1 second, a fraction of a second on the clock, they decided the game. The referees decided the game in this one. And they decided the game to some extent over the course of 40 minutes because they were letting the players play. It got physical. It got tough. Again, there were only 19 free throws in this game. It's not for lack of shooting. They shot 111 shots between these two teams. They were firing up shots. So they couldn't make anything, but they weren't calling fouls. 12 total fouls called on these two teams. And one of them was a tech. So really, 24 total fouls called, 12 on each team, and one of those was a technical foul on Tay Davis. So really, there's only 23 fouls called in this game, which is not much. That's not a lot of foul calls. But they call one there. They call one in the final, literally the final second of the game on a ticky-tack rebounding attempt. I'm not going to sit here and say Pitt deserved to win this game. I don't know that Notre Dame deserved to win this game. Look, bro, when it's 55-44, I don't think anybody played very well. When both teams shot under 40%, neither team could shoot threes to save their life. Like, nobody really played all that well. 28 turnovers combined in this game. I mean, like, it wasn't good play, you know? I think Pitt had 10 assists on 21 made baskets. Notre Dame had 9 assists on 21 made baskets. Like, they weren't playing high-level basketball. So I'm not going to sit here and say, wow, Pitt deserved to win this game. But they deserve to have a chance in overtime at least. They at least put themselves in position to have a chance in overtime. And they're distracting us from what we really want to do, which is complain about Pitt basketball. Like, there's a lot of comments and questions already. You guys are rolling in on the Panther-Lair Post-Game show here. What we really want to do is complain about Pitt basketball. We want to complain about Cam Corn. We want to complain about Ishmael Leggett. We want to complain about Jeff Capel. And they have taken that from us, at least for the time being, with a foul call in the final 0.5 seconds. It's a terrible way for the game to end. It's an unfortunate way for the season to end. And you know who deserved something better than this? We did. We deserved a better ending than that, just to be able to watch some basketball. We deserve to watch 5 more minutes of basketball. And it doesn't matter if Jalen Lowe doesn't step on the baseline. But I digress. All right, that's the Panther-Lair Post-Game show here on a Tuesday afternoon after Pitt's 55-54 loss to Notre Dame in the ACC Tournament. Not a good game, really not a well-played game. We could say there was good defense, and I think the TV broadcast tried to sell us on that for a little while. I'm not really buying it. Didn't feel like the defense was all that good. It just felt like these two teams played really poorly throughout the game. Lots of turnovers. Lots of mistakes, lots of bad shooting, and they just kept firing up threes. Shout out to Notre Dame. They stopped shooting threes. They only attempted 4 in the second half. Pitt kept firing. They went 2 of 10 in the second half. Notre Dame attempted 16 threes in the first half. Pitt attempted 12. So Pitt was on pace. They shot 22 in the game, 12 in the first half, 10 in the second half. Notre Dame stopped on the 3-point shooting in the second half, and actually their overall field goal percentage improved. So did Pitt's. Pitt lost the rebounding battle 37-31. Not really much. Both teams had 10 offensive rebounds each. There were plenty of opportunities for offensive rebounds with all the missed baskets. Again, 111 shots attempted between these two teams, only 42 makes. So not a great game of offensively. Not a game that you're going to say was very pretty or all that good, but it looked like Pitt would have a chance to get out of it with a win. Even in an ugly situation, it looked like they would have a chance to move on to the Wednesday game against North Carolina and keep playing in the ACC tournament at least for a little while. I'm not going to say that, well, they could have kept their hopes for March Madness alive. I mean, those hopes were highly unlikely and certainly not something that anyone was banking on, but a victory should have been a victory was available to Pitt. And we can backtrack from the foul call. And again, we could talk about Jalen Lowe stepping on the baseline with 19 seconds left to go. We can talk about, Jalen Lowe. I didn't like it. There was this, after Notre Dame tied it at 54, Lowe took like this up and under scoop shot. I didn't really care for that. I know the TV announcers said that Jeff Capel is encouraging Jalen Lowe after that, saying that's good. We like it. I didn't like that shot. Lowe had another one. With about 2 minutes to go, a drive that just, in my notes, I wrote down silly drive. Cam Corn ended up getting a foul. After that, it was, there were opportunities that were there. They made some bad decisions as they are wont to do. But with a minute 30, Pitt had taken a lead, 51-50. They were ahead with a minute 6 left to go, 54-52. This game was there to be won. But as Pitt has done so many times over the last 31 games, certainly over the last 17 games, today being number 18, they failed to capitalize. They failed to capitalize on the opportunities that were there. Notre Dame didn't play well. Notre Dame isn't really all that good. But now Pitt has lost to Notre Dame twice, just like they lost to, NC State, just like they lost to Florida State, just like they lost to Virginia. I mean, the bottom half of this conference is littered with teams that beat Pitt. Never mind the top half of the conference being full of teams that beat Pitt. There are very few teams in this conference that Pitt did win against. 7 wins total, 2 of those coming against Syracuse. 8 wins, total. 2 of those coming against Syracuse. And then you get 1 against Boston College, 1 against Miami. You beat Cal. You beat an entirely unremarkable performance in the ACC this year for Pitt basketball, capped by one of the most, it was shaping up to be a largely unremarkable game until you have a most remarkable finish. Former Pitt commit Judah Mintz, who ended up going to Syracuse, even tweeted, "Fire the ref from the Pitt game immediately." So even Judah Mintz is on board with Pitt and that ending being pretty bad. All right, let's jump into the we are live here on a Tuesday. So I appreciate everybody who has time here at 4:00 in the afternoon on a Tuesday to do it, to tune in for a live stream. We're going to take as many comments and questions as we can over the next 45 minutes or so. But before we dive in, make sure you like this video and subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. That way you won't miss any of our Pitt video coverage. And then we got a lot going on. Jim is in Charlotte, so he'll have all the coverage from the ACC tournament right there at Panther-Lair.com, the Pitt site on the 24/7 Sports Network. And the message boards are bumping. Our live thread, let me just check it right now at 4:13. Our live thread has about 350 posts, and it's not going to slow down anytime soon. There's a lot of people who are fired up and talking about it. So if you want to join other Pitt fans and complain about this game, you should do it right here in the live stream, and then you should go over and check out the message board, because I don't think those threads are going to die anytime soon. Let's get into some comments and questions here. Did I already say to like and subscribe? If I didn't, do it. Josh Newark says, "What a perfect ending to this season." Yeah, they found a new way to do it. Whatever you want to say about Pitt, and this probably applies to football as well, they find new ways, right? Like, you didn't see this coming. You might have expected a loss, and I think some people did. Our whole Panther-Lair staff picked Pitt to win this game, which should have been a tip-off that they were probably going to lose. I think our good friend Andrew Filipponi from 93.7 The Fan also picked Pitt -4. Again, should have been a tip-off that this wasn't going to go the Panthers' way, but that's okay. But they always find new ways, right, to surprise you, even sometimes in a good way, right? Like, oh, wow, they had 3 pick sixes against Syracuse. Who would have ever seen something like that happen? Never would have guessed, right? And, there it is. So they always come up with new things. They always surprise you, and they certainly came up with something today. I'm just going to go through as many as I can. John Kristovich says Pitt was robbed. Luke Olszewski says crazy. Caniac, 1230 says fire Capel. Rolo Brown Town Tony says, "I don't feel anything anymore." Josh Newark says, "I don't want any whining about the ending call. They played like trash, played like trash for the better part of the year. Bad teams lose games like this, just like football, losing a stupid bowl game to a MAC school." I mean, there's something to be said for that. Because, look, Pitt did not play well in this game. They had 22 points at halftime. Pitt was not, the final 9 minutes or so of the first half, they were the better team. I thought they were demonstrably better, not just because they turned a 10-point deficit into a 5-point deficit by halftime, but I thought they were better. I thought they played better. And in the second half, I mean, they finally took a lead with 14 minutes to go when Cam Corrin, who had some big shots in the second half. I got to say, Cam Corrin did. He had a hook shot with about 14 minutes to go that put Pitt up by 1. He had a putback off a miss by Jalen Lowe that turned into an and-one opportunity. He missed the free throw. That made the game 39-35. If he had made the free throw, it would be 40-35. And, Tay Davis still could have overcome that deficit because they had 2 free throws. He intentionally missed his second one. And then Corrin, I thought, he scored all of his points in the second half, I believe. And then with 2.5 minutes to go, he gave Pitt a 49-48 lead on a play out of a timeout. Cam Corrin, we could say what we want about him. Let's check the final plus-minus here. Corrin was a -3. Guillermo Diaz-Graham was a +2. So a little bit closer than it was in that Boston College game where Corn was a +1 and Guillermo Diaz-Graham was a +30. Not exactly quite as spread as that. Minutes-wise, Corn played 26. Guillermo played 14. Guillermo had 5 rebounds. Corn had 4, but all 4 were offensive rebounds. So that's interesting. He shot 5 of 7 from the floor and scored 10 points. Jalen Lowe is Pitt's top scorer with 17 points. He shot 6 of 18 in this game, 1 of 5 from 3. That was a bit of a problem. Him continuing to shoot threes. He had 4 assists, but he also had 5 turnovers and 2 steals. Not a great game for Jalen Lowe, although he did have the game high 17 points. Lowe and Corn were the only Pitt players in double figures. Ishmael Leggett 4 points on 2 of 9 shooting. He did not attempt a single free throw, which I think tells you a little bit about how Ishmael Leggett played in this game, what he attempted in this game, and what he tried to do. He didn't attempt a free throw. That should be the kind of thing that Lowe does all the time, Leggett does all the time, is shoot free throws. And he didn't get to the line once in this game. Actually, the only guys who did were Jalen Lowe had 4 attempts. He made all 4. Brandon Cummings had 4 free throws. He made all 4. And then Corn was 0 for 1 when he missed on that and 1. Lowe and Corn, the only guys on Pitt's roster in double figures. Notre Dame had 3 guys. Burton Davis and Constantinople had double figures. Davis had 11. Burton and Konstantinovsky. You heard him say that name all through the game, and I still can't really pronounce it. He had 10 points and 9 rebounds. Pretty solid performance for him. But I largely agree with Josh's sentiment. They didn't play well. And like, if you play better, if you're a better team, if you play better, you perform better throughout the game, then it doesn't come down to some like nonsense ticky-tacky call. Maybe you're up 7 at that point. If you can make some of the bunnies. Amsal Delilich missed 2 threes, I think in the first half. There were shots he absolutely should have made. There were other open threes. Zach Austin missed an alley-oop and a fast break dunk. Make those 2, which you should, plus Cam Corn converting an and 1, and now that foul called with 0.5 seconds doesn't matter. You put yourself in a position for that to matter. You put yourself in a position for the refs to decide the game. And while they should not have decided the game, while they should not have been able to, basically hand Notre Dame the opportunity to win with 0.5 seconds left to go, you created the situation. By you, I mean Pitt. Pitt created the situation by not converting a lot of the opportunities they had throughout the game. They fall down 6-0. They didn't score. They didn't make a bucket until 16:23. Almost 3.5 minutes into the game, Jalen Lowe hit a 3-pointer. And then they go down by 10, at halfway through the first half. They're down 20-10. So, we can complain about that foul call, and we should complain about that foul call. It was a bad call in a bad situation, and not the kind of call that should be made. But Pitt created a situation for that call to directly impact and ultimately decide the outcome of the game. The Skittery says, I hate being a Pitt fan. Grant Sakuda says, Pitt just got pitted. The Skittery says, my internet went out. Well, I'm glad you're back. Let's see. Rolo Browntown Tony says, just when you think you've seen it all as a Pitt fan, LMAO. John Christovich says the referees were terrible in this game. I liked how they let them play. I liked how the game was called for 39 minutes and 59.5 seconds. I thought the game was called well. I thought it was called evenly. I didn't think it really favored one team or the other, as evidenced by the foul calls at the end. 12 on each team. One was technical on Tay Davis. One was the call at the end on Zach Austin. So, kind of balance out there. I thought it was called fair throughout the game. I thought they did a good job. I didn't think there were too many questionable, out of bounds calls or goaltending or anything like that. I thought it was called fair. And that's all you can really ask for. Let us know what you're going to, what you're going to allow us to get away with, and then be consistent with that for the course of 40 minutes. The refs established early on that they were going to let guys play. When was the first free throw in this game? There was a free throw early on, 2.5 minutes or so. And that was the flagrant foul on Cam Corn. So, even then the free throws weren't really shooting fouls. It was just a flagrant foul on Cam Corn that led to free throws. And then Brandon Cummings shot the first real free throws of the game about 6.5 minutes in. So they established early on they were going to let guys play. They established early on that it was going to be a physical game, that they weren't going to blow the whistle all the time. And I think they stayed consistent with that all the way to the end until the final 0.5 seconds. Max Russo says that was an absolute joke. The refs should be ashamed of themselves. And these are veteran refs, too. I think I have their names. I think they're in the box score here. Tony Henderson, Tommy Morrissey, and Jeff Pond. Jeff Pond? Is that cut off? Well, anyway, I think Tony Henderson was the guy who called that foul. And, I thought they did a good job. They're veteran refs. That just was a bad call at the end. The Skittery says we probably wouldn't have won anyway. Yeah, I mean, who knows what Pitt's fate would be in overtime still. Gavin Plaucha says just an insane ending to an abject disaster of a season. Yeah, it's I guess in a season full of memorable disappointments, this one can kind of cap it off. This is a perfectly fitting way to end. I don't disagree about that. Peninsula P says Ishmael Leggett's been a huge disappointment. He's had his moments. There have been times when he's been the best player on the team. I thought he played well against Boston College. But he's also had games where he's sort of disappeared. And today it felt like he disappeared and it just didn't make a huge impact. Leggett attempted 9 shots. He was 2 of 9. 3 of his 9 shots were beyond the arc. He did have 7 rebounds, which is a positive. He had an assist and a turnover in 37 minutes played. But, the no free throws, I think really is illustrative of the way he was playing. And some of it is that they weren't calling a lot of fouls, just like I just praised the refs for. But still, Ishmael Leggett is at his best when he's initiating contact, when he's playing physical, when he's going to the hoop and battling, and battling in a physical way. And getting, and ending up at the free throw line. And that wasn't the case today. There were a few times where maybe something could have been called where he was attempting to play that way. But it was almost like once it became clear that the refs weren't going to call all that much, Leggett didn't do as many of those sort of Leggett things that he often does. Pitt Chag says it shouldn't have been a foul, but losing teams lose. Lowe's turnover and bad shot selection put them in that spot on top of the continuous failure to secure a defensive rebound. Yeah, that was that was a big part of it. Like I said, that stepping out of bounds on the baseline with 19.2 seconds or whatever it was. I mean, that's a killer. That's an absolute killer. And that was a possession to take the lead, and put Notre Dame on the offensive down 2, potentially with, less than 20 seconds, probably less than 15 seconds. As far as the defensive rebound, yeah, Notre Dame had 6 offensive rebounds in the second half. Pitt had 8 defensive rebounds. Pitt had 7 offensive rebounds in the second half, 4 by Cam Corrin, and then, 1 by Leggett, 1 by Lowe, and I think 1 was like a team rebound. Rebounding has been an issue all season long, and you're right. Like losing teams lose, and again, it was, the game was decided in those final 0.5 seconds, but Pitt put itself in a position for the game to be decided there. Like we could go through countless mistakes, bad shots, missed shots, turnovers, all kinds of issues throughout this game, and find all kinds of areas where Pitt blew it. Pitt's 11 turnovers turned into 5 points for Notre Dame. That's 5 points in a 1-point game, a game that should have been an overtime game. Notre Dame's 17 turnovers, Pitt only got 12 points out of it. You should get more, you should be able to get more in those situations. Pitt had 10 offensive rebounds and only got 6 second chance points. Pitt got 28 points in the paint. They got outscored by 6 in the paint. I mean, there's countless things you can look through and say, this is where the game was ultimately lost, or this is ultimately where they set up the scenario where a foul call, a BS foul call in the final second could literally decide the game. You created the situation. So there is some culpability there. So, I mean, we can complain about the call, and I think legitimately so, because it was a bad call and it wasn't a foul, and it was certainly not a foul in that situation. But we also have to acknowledge all those things that Pitt did that led to that game being 54-54 in the final second. Rolo Browntown Tony says Jalen Lowe's hero ball really did us in. That's been an issue. Lowe was 3 of 10 from the floor in the second half. I thought he made some big plays, but he was 3 of 10. The rest of Pitt was 10 of 20. The rest of the team shot 50%. Lowe shot 3 of 10. And actually, you could take out Ishmael Leggett. He was 0 of 4 in the second half. So Lowe and Leggett go 3 of 14 in the second half. The rest of the team goes 10 of 16. Cam Corrin was 5 of 5. Brandon Cummings was 2 of 4. Zach Austin was 2 of 5. Jorge was 1 of 2. Guillermo didn't take a shot. And Amsal Delilich didn't take a shot. They both played 3 minutes each. Yeah, like 10 of 16 for the rest of the team. 3 of 14 for these two guys. I mean, it doesn't take much to put 2 and 2 together in that situation. When you talk about the reasons that Pitt lost, when you talk about the reasons why this was a 54-54 game in the final second, those are some of the things you look at. Jay Frank says, terrible ending to what is a terrible season with a terrible coach. Yeah, it's been a disappointing season. I mean, like I'm not the first to say that, boy, think of where they were when they were 12-2 and 3-0 in the ACC after the Stanford game. But like, it's night and day since then. And I mean, is it just because Damian Dunn came back the next game? I don't think that's the case. But this team, as the competition stiffened, this team did not answer the bell. They did not continue to elevate their level of play. And so they get a win over Ohio State, who I don't even think Ohio State, are they even going to make the NCAA tournament again this year? They got a win over West Virginia, who's going to make the tournament. I don't know if they have another win over a tournament team. Not that I can think of, unless I'm forgetting somebody in the ACC, which I don't think I am. Got my trusty game notes here. Cal, Stanford, Syracuse. Well, they beat Carolina, so I guess that might be the one possibility. Dave Yark says, BS call there, but Lowe cannot step out of bounds either. The real question is, does Pitt accept an NIT invite? Pretty sure Alan Green would insist, but you never know. I don't know. They turned it down last year, ostensibly because, well, Blake Hinson's leaving and Federico's transferring and Bubba's going to the NBA and guys are hurt and this and that. Like, if it was me, I'd go play in the NIT. If it was me, I would get, 27 minutes a night for Brandon Cummings and Amsal Delilich and Pamba Nukanti. I'd get these guys out there. I would have them play. I would use it as a building opportunity for next year. But the fact that they turned it down last year makes me really wonder if they would take it this year. Rolo Browntown Tony says, does Pitt even get an invite to the NIT? I think so. I you need teams to play in it, right? There's only so many teams out there that have like winning records and stuff. And that was, you need somebody to play. It's funny. The Skiddery says Corrin was good today, and Pitt Chag says Cam Corrin was Pitt's worst player today, and it's really not close. But that's been the story of the season. I think in the first half he struggled. I don't think he played very well in the first half, but I think he made some big baskets in the second half. Like, I don't think there's any question about it. And I know, look, I'm not the first to say it, but I've certainly been saying a lot lately that Cam Corrin just doesn't really seem to impact winning all that much. His points just don't seem to change things. It just doesn't matter. But today it mattered. I mean, he made multiple baskets that were big. He gave Pitt its first lead of the game with a basket. He gave Pitt its biggest lead of the game with an N1 opportunity. He scored all of his points. Did he score all of his points in the second half? They kept saying that on TV, but he had 10 points and they were all in the second half. He was 5 of 5. And he had 4 offensive rebounds in the second half. In the second half, Cam Corrin, I think was a positive for Pitt. What was his we always like this plus minus. Let me look. Yeah, Corn was +5 in the second half. He had the best plus minus. If we're gonna use plus minus to hold it against him and prop up Guillermo Diaz-Graham, I think we can give him a little credit where it's due. He played 17 minutes. He was 5 of 5 from the floor. He had 4 offensive rebounds, 1 assist, and he was +5. Pitt was 5 points better than Notre Dame with Cam Corn on the court. And so in the second half, I'm talking about. So I think we can at least give him credit for the second half. I don't know if he was the worst player all the way through, but in the second half, I think he was pretty good. In the first half, he was bad. He was not good. So Josh Newark says, who deserves the shot of the game? Man, it's like 4:00 on a Tuesday. I got other stuff I have to do tonight. We're not having a shot of the game today. I wish I could. I wish, I would like to. It would be, but there's too much to do later. I got to tape like tomorrow's morning Pitt. We got to do all kinds of different stuff. Different things that you guys don't care about, but I have to do. And one shot is just one shot, but we're not going to go down that path yet. But Josh Newark says, who deserves a shot of the game? I will take 2 for the missed Austin dunks. I mean, how about those? They're right there. One's an alley-oop, pretty well set up. The other one's a fast break. Again, as good a look as he's going to get. And I feel like they have struggled to convert alley-oops for the past few weeks, maybe longer. I can't remember the last time they converted one. I'm sure they did at some point in the last couple of weeks, but it feels like they just brick them all the time. All the time. Or have recently. Zach Austin has to finish those dunks. He finishes those 2 dunks. Guess what? His foul, whether it's a foul or not, doesn't matter. And again, there's a litany of things you can look at in this entire game that you say, boy, if that doesn't happen, if they do that better, if they don't mess that up, the game goes differently. It doesn't matter about that foul at the end. Got a super chatter who came in, so we'll go to that. Bill Florigen says, I think next season is going to say a lot about the future of this staff. I know that's not an original take, but it will be interesting. Bill, I got to tell you, my man, at this point, I don't think a lot of people want to see this staff back for next season. I think we all know that they will be. And will next season, like you say, next season will tell us a lot about the future of this staff. I mean, the reality is you're looking at 7 years of evidence, 7 years of this current operation, and they've got one NCAA tournament appearance to show for it. And being the poster boy for the selection committee's messing up last year doesn't exactly count because you didn't get to play any games for that. Nobody gave you, a play-in game because everybody was holding you up as look at how the tournament selection committee messed up. That doesn't help. It's good PR, but it doesn't get you in. It doesn't get you in the March Madness. Nobody got a chance to pick Pitt in their brackets last year. Only once in the 7 years of Jeff Capel have you've been able to choose Pitt to advance far beyond reason in the NCAA tournament bracket. Only once. And so, when you talk about, next season is going to say a lot about the future of the staff. You talk about it's a make or break year. I mean, I don't know if it's a make or break year. It feels sort of broken right now. And you can always improve, you can always change, but it's actually going to take change. It's going to take a different approach. It's going to take a realistic assessment of what they did this year, the team they put together, how that team fit together, what that team was supposed to be able to do, what that team did, and why there was such a disconnect between what you thought was going to happen and what actually did happen. And some of that's on the players, and a lot of that's on the coaches, but it's on all of them together to figure out how you got from point A, which is where you thought you were going to be, to point B, which is where you ended up being. This is a pretty wide gulf. I think the expectations were really, really high within this program. They were certainly high outside the program. I think we all had high expectations for this team. I think within the program, they had high expectations for this team, and they fell well short of those expectations. And there's one guy and a bunch of people around him who need to figure out why the team fell that far short of expectations. Let's see here. Scrolling through. The Skiddery says, how can you go from scoring 92 against a bad team, but only score 54 against another bad team 3 days later? That's because that's who this team is. They're not the team that scores 93, like they did against Boston College. They're not that team. they're probably closer to this team. I think the way their offense worked or didn't work, it was this is more of who they are. And, they were way too inconsistent to ever settle into anything and be something, be something sort of consistently throughout the season. They were way too inconsistent for that. And the result was sort of night by night, they found new ways and different ways to lose. Craig Banani says, perfect ending to a perfect season. Nothing will change with Capel as the coach, just mediocrity. Jay Frank says another classic game of Corrin getting out rebounded by Leggett by 3. How? Leggett's a good rebounder, but yeah, look, Cam Corrin's not a good rebounder. All right, we know this. Okay, like there were, he wasn't a good rebounder at Florida State. The Pitt coaching staff convinced themselves that there were things that Florida State did and ways that Florida State played that when they did something different at Pitt, he would rebound better. He would put up better numbers. Now, they've taken risks like this before. They've taken gambles on projection, thinking that they have something figured out about a guy's game and that when he comes to Pitt, they'll be able to do certain things with him to help him. And it's worked at different times. You know what I mean? I think it worked with Ishmael Leggett. I think it worked with Greg Elliott. And, in this case with Cam Corrin, it didn't work. He didn't improve his rebounding. He's been average at best as a rebounder and often worse. He hasn't been a good rebounder all season. And, credit to him that he got 4 offensive rebounds in the second half. That's big. That's big, but he's not a good rebounder. And I think it's been sort of proven this year that he's not going to be a rebounder or a good rebounder. Peninsula P on it says, honestly, every Pitt fan knew that they would not execute down the stretch and close out the game. I think I kept waiting for the bottom to fall out, but they kept putting themselves in position where they were right there. Like they still ended up, leading 54-52 with a minute left to go. So like, it was like, well, maybe they'll pull it off. I thought they would blow it in the final 2 minutes, not get into the final minute and blow it. I thought if they could hold on to get down to the minute mark, they would have been, they would have been able to hold on. But obviously that wasn't the case because they were tied and got that foul call. Evan D says, don't care how bad they played. No team deserves to have their season ended by incompetent refs. See, I'm on board with you. Like Pitt absolutely created the situation for the refs to make that call. And for that call, not the situation for the refs to make that call, but created the situation where that call killed their season, right? Pitt created that situation. And so Pitt absolutely has something to blame, shares some of the blame by it, for it. But it was still a bad call. That doesn't mean that it was a good call. Even if Pitt kind of played pretty lousy for the most part throughout those first 39 minutes and 59.5 seconds, they still, that doesn't change the fact that it was a bad call. Both things can be true. Pitt Chag says Judah Mintz, who thinks the ref from this game should be fired. Pitt Chag says Judah Mintz would have fit great on this year's Pitt team. Evan D says that's probably the last play Zach Austin will ever play in an important game of basketball. I don't know. I think Zach Austin can probably get paid to play basketball somewhere. I'm not sure if I never really bought into the NBA hype. I could be completely off about that. I know NBA guys love a 3-and-D guy and all that, but I don't know if I really see that. I never really kind of believed he was as good and consistent a shooter as he was at certain points. But I think he's good enough that he could go to Europe or someplace. I think he's got enough natural ability and athleticism that he can make an impact and play. Craig Banani says, just to thank, as a super chatter, says just to thank you for everything you do all year long. I wish we had done more basketball post-game shows, honestly, Craig. It's sort of disappointing that we didn't. It just never really seemed to work out as much as I wasn't able to do it as often as I would have liked. It would have been fun, but we had, for whatever reason, we didn't do as many post game shows. But these are always I enjoy the post game shows. They're always fun. The Skittery says, if you're capable, do you ever tell Ishmael Leggett and Jalen Lowe to stop shooting the ball? No, I don't think he does. I don't think he does. I think he lets them play. I think he believes that they're his best players, and he's not wrong about that. And I think he believes that he should let his best players lead the team. And I don't think he's entirely wrong about that either. So, no, I don't think he goes to those guys. He's like, that's it. You got to stop shooting. I'm sure he wishes sometimes there was better shot selection. I'm sure sometimes he wishes they passed or distributed better. But he also, and you heard Jim Boeheim talk about it too. Like, Pitt's guards have to take over this game. Pitt's guards have to take over this game. Like, I think coaches are going to trust their guys to lead the way, even if they end up with an inefficient night. Like Jalen Lowe, what was he, 6 of 16? Is that what he finished at in this game? 6 of 18, excuse me. Even if Jalen Lowe goes 6 of 18, I mean, he had a lot of games like this. He had games where he was 6 of 16, games where he was 6 of 18. I think Jeff Capel is willing to let him do it because he wants to trust his guys, his top guys, to make the plays. And like I say, I think Jim Boeheim was endorsing that. Jim Boeheim kept waiting for Lowe and Leggett to take over the game. And it happened to some extent with Lowe in the second half. It never really happened with Leggett. But I think I thought it was interesting to hear Boeheim keep saying that. I could have done without all the ongoing jokes, particularly in the first half, about how long Boeheim coached and how long he's been around and all that stuff. It was a little bit too silly for me in the first half. I was kind of like, guys, come on, man. It's an ACC tournament game. I know it's the first game in the tournament. I know it's the first day. I know it's, you're 11 through 15 seeds. I know that they're going to move on to the broadcasting A team as they get a couple more days into this tournament, and you guys ain't it. But still, you could take this seriously. Like, approach it with the gravity that it deserves as an elimination game. That they kept talking about finality and how for one of these teams the season was going to end. So show a little respect for it. Don't just sit around joking about how Jim Boeheim was a babysitter for Bob Cousy or whatever they were talking about. Like, come on, it's enough. Like, that joke was funny the first time. They can move on. Caniac 1230 says, got to do what NC State did and cut bait. Need a new coach tomorrow. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't know what NC State is on the hook for buyout wise. I thought I saw it wasn't that much, which changes the scenario. Ethan Chetkov says, if the entire team didn't fail to execute for 40 minutes, the refs don't matter. Leggett ghosted. Lowe learned nothing from the BC game, rebounding, whatever. No, and that's absolutely. I think both of these things can be true. I think both of these things can be true. That one, this team, they didn't play well enough to win. And that's why they ended up in the situation they were in. That's why they ended up in a spot where a bad call could decide the game. So, because they didn't play well enough to win for the first 39 minutes, 59.5 seconds. But also true is the fact that it was a bad call. Also true is that the refs made a bad call in a terrible situation. And that's true. I think both of those things are true. And one doesn't have to take away from the other. We can definitely spend a lot of time, and we have, and we will, I'm sure, going forward, spend a lot of time talking about what Pitt did and didn't do all the way through this game leading up to that final second. But that final second is still relevant, and that final second still matters, and it ultimately decided the game. Because if Pitt had snuck out of there, maybe a win in overtime or something like that, no matter how they got there, they would be advancing. Just like no matter how Notre Dame got there, they are advancing, and they'll face North Carolina tomorrow. So, even though Notre Dame won that game by 1 point, even though Notre Dame won that game with a free throw with 0.5 seconds left to go, it still counts. Notre Dame didn't play well enough to win either, but they did win with that free throw. Evan D says you can play the can't blame the refs game when you lose by 4 and there were some questionable calls throughout, not when there's a horrendous call with time expiring. He goes on. Oh, no, that's not him. That's somebody else. Says, or he said that. He says, you can play that game. You can play the game of can't blame the refs when you lose by 4 and there were questionable calls throughout. And that's sort of my thing is it was a close game. It was a game that was down. It was a tie game when that call was made. And they weren't calling stuff like that all game. They weren't calling it tight. There weren't a lot of ticky-tacky touch fouls called. It was pretty loose throughout. It was pretty physical, and they let them play. It felt like an old Big East game. It was great. I was a big fan. It went fast. I think it was the official time was like less than 2 hours total. I think tip-off was 2:03 and it ended by 4:00. I mean, I love that. I love those games that move along. It was a good game. Or it was a good game in that regard. It wasn't necessarily a good game in terms of basketball, but it was a good game in keeping the game. It was a good game in terms of keeping the game moving, not calling a lot of fouls, and just letting guys play. But until the final 0.5 seconds. Let's see. The Skittery says we should have gotten Jai Lucas. I mean, how many Duke assistants do you want to get, man? Come on. Evan D is thinking, I'm sure Zach Austin is thinking, if I just made one of those 2 dunks, yeah, I'm sure he probably is. He's probably got a lot of what could have been moments. I think Zach Austin probably has a few regrets from that game. Certainly getting called for that foul. I think he's probably feeling pretty low about that, as well as the dunks that he was unable to convert. Let's see. Scrolling through, see some more comments just to seeing what guys have. Kevin Plouch just says, Chris, our savior plays at 7 p.m. on ESPN tonight. I'm drawing a blank. I've been so focused on everything that's going on here that you'll have to clue me in on what you're referencing, because thinking a lot about these foul calls and stuff. Let's see. Yeah, Roy says, don't forget Jalen Lowe took a bad shot before he stepped out also, and it should have been Notre Dame ball there. Should have been Notre Dame ball. Oh, do you mean on the one that got reviewed? Is that what you're talking about? Yeah, I think the Notre Dame kid's hand pushed it out. I mean, Corin definitely touched it, but I think the Notre Dame kid touched it last. So I think it was right to give the ball to Pitt there. You guys are arguing with each other. It's always fun when we get to that point. Although I'm reading through comments from like 20 minutes ago, so I apologize for that. Beverly Furl says, what makes this even worse is our future doesn't look bright. How is our class ranked 80th in the country while a school like Penn State is ranked in the top 25? NIL is not the issue. Well, I mean, part of that, when you look at the class rankings, Pitt has 1 commitment. I don't know what Penn State's recruiting class looks like, but Pitt has 1. So, that there is a quantity element there when you have these rankings, the sort of cumulative points rankings for for recruiting classes and how we rank them. But ultimately, like what's going to happen or what's going to affect next year is not just the recruiting class. And it's a very small part of next year's season is going to be impacted by this recruiting class. The next season is going to be impacted by who they bring back from the current roster and who they add in from the transfer portal. They will lose guys to the portal. We know that. That's part of the whole deal. But they will add guys from the portal. So who do they keep and who do they add? Those are the things that will impact next season the most, far more than the recruiting class. Because, I mean, how much was this season impacted by Brandon Cummings and Amsal Delilich? Not as much as it should have been, if you ask someone who might be me. But this season was ultimately impacted the most by the returning players, Jalen Lowe, Ishmael Leggett, Zach Austin, the Diaz-Graham twins, and the transfer additions, Damian Dunn and Cam Corin. And next year is going to be impacted far more by who they keep and who they bring in. Let's see. Steel Will 51 says, awful call. That said, how does one get excited for Pitt basketball next season? Stuck with Jeff Capel. Assistants likely staying. Pitt will run it back. Shouldn't happen, but will because of the buyout. I mean, like on another day, particularly after we see who they, what I just said, who they return and who they add from the portal. On another day, we can have a conversation about why you should be excited about next year. I don't think anybody really has the stomach for that right now. I don't know if I really have the inspiration for that right now. But on another day, we can go through that and discuss, who they, why you should get excited, why next year is going to be different. Right now, that's a bit of a tough sell at the end of where do they end up? 17-15 or something like that. Is that what the final record was? 17-15. And 8-12 in the ACC, 0-1 in the ACC tournament. Jeff Capel now 4-7 in ACC tournament games. It's a tough sell for me to convince you of why you should be excited for next season. Let's see. Louis Panza says it's because the refs try to avoid overtime. They are scumbags. I think that's a bit much. I don't think they were trying to look. And the ref who called it was the ref who probably had the best sight on the play. He had the most direct line of vision on that play. So I get it that he saw it. I just don't think you should call it. Let's see. Yeah, the Tort says, I don't care how disappointing of a season they had. A game should not end that way. Ethan Chetkov says, I've said my piece on the refs, but I do feel terrible for Zach Austin. He was rough today, but every game you had to feel like he played tough while the guys around him were soft as Charmin. Zach Austin, since we've now seen his final game in a Pitt uniform, I would say this. Nice player, interesting player, unique player, explosive player, exciting player. Some things he does really, really well, but ultimately not the kind of guy you can build a roster around, build an offense around, or build your game plan around. Like, he's a complementary piece. And far too often this season, he was put into a primary role, a non-complementary role. Like, when you roll out there with the starting lineups that they used in 25 out of 32 games this year, where they have Jalen Lowe, Ishmael Leggett, Zach Austin, Guillermo Diaz-Graham, and Cam Corrin, you are now putting Zach Austin into a primary role when he's a complementary player. And I think that was a big part of the problem. Like, of all the problems, and there were many, one big part of the problem was putting Zach Austin into a role as a primary player. And for a while, it was working all right because he was making threes. But when that sort of faded a bit and he wasn't shooting as well, now you have a guy out there who's again, a complementary piece. And there were too many of those. There were too many complementary pieces on the floor together. And I think one of the things that worked so well in the Boston College game, and not as much today because they didn't shoot as well, but still I think had the greatest potential, is that when they went with these lineups with Lowe, Leggett, and Brandon Cummings, along with Guillermo Diaz-Graham, along with Zach Austin and Cam Corrin, because now you had three ball handlers on the court. And maybe this is the thing they lost the most with Damian Dunn's injury. It wasn't just the defense, but it was having three ball handlers on the court. Three legitimate guys who can handle the ball, who can distribute, who can dribble and drive and finish at the hoop, or have a chance to. When they had Dunn, they had three guys who could do that. When they put Cummings out there, they had three guys who can do that. When they put Delilich out there with Lowe and Leggett, they had three guys who could do that. When they just had Lowe and Leggett, they only had two. And you can't, Zach Austin wasn't going to fill that kind of role. Certainly Guillermo and Cam Corrin weren't going to fill that kind of role. And maybe that is an extended fallout from the two center lineups that they used for so much this season. That they, ended up, they wanted to have Zach Austin on the court, and Damian Dunn was hurt. So they end up with too many complementary pieces, not enough guys who can handle the ball. All right, a couple minutes left here. Steel Will 51 says, Chris, what can the program do to get fans back on board? This season obviously ain't going to cut it. This coaching in year 7 isn't going to cut it either. Look, I don't know what gets the fans back on board. Because, the reality is, for as excited as people were about the hiring of Jeff Capel, and people were fired up about it, it's not like the fans got back on board in 2018. It's not like that building was full. All right, that building has been fading in its energy ever since the late era, the late part of the Jamie Dixon era. It's been fading and dipping. And it hasn't rebounded. And the last couple of years of the Dixon era, the 2 years of the Stallings era, and now 7 years of Jeff Capel have only drained it even more. And so what gets the fans back on board is not a return to the NCAA tournament. I don't even think it's, I mean, like, you would have to be ranked like top 5 and playing Duke or Carolina right now to get that building packed and as juiced as it was back in the golden days of what is now, 20 years ago, 15 to 20 years ago. And hiring a new coach isn't going to do it either. Like, Capel got the fans excited and they still didn't show up. So getting the fans back on board, like, it's not a quick fix. It's not something that can happen overnight. It's something that would take 2, 3, 4 years to build. Because even after they went to the tournament 2 years ago and won a couple games and had everybody excited and fired up, they still, it's not like people showed up that much last year. So I think this fan base has retreated. And it's going to take a lot. It's going to take years, plural, of sustained success to get them back. Let's see. All right, last question, because we got to we've got to move on. We have other things to do here. I was almost, before this game started, I was going to tape tomorrow's morning pit. I'm like, doesn't matter. I'm going to do a post-game show. We'll talk about basketball then, and I'll tape tomorrow's morning pit to be about football because, it'll be fine. We don't need to record a morning pit off this basketball game when we're doing the post-game show. And then they go and lose the game 55-54 on a foul call in the final 1 second. Yes, we will have a morning pit about basketball tomorrow. Final question. So that's among the many things we have to do tonight. Pitt Chag says, is Jeff Capel? So I was talking about Capel, really kind of thinking things over, asking some tough questions of himself and his staff and his roster this offseason. And so Pitt Chag said, is Jeff Capel capable of that level of introspection? Is the only hope that AD Alan Green forces assistant coaching changes, and we just hope to get lucky that a different perspective sticks? Is Jeff Capel capable of that level of introspection? It's $1 million question. It is, and I don't have the answer. I think a few years ago, he adjusted his approach to roster building and roster management, in terms of really having an eye toward chemistry and fit and how guys mesh together. And I think that's how you ended up with some of the rosters that you saw over the last 2 years that had success and played well together and were just a good fit. But it's different with the kind of introspection that I think, and I think you would agree, that Capel needs this year. It's a different level of introspection. It's a different type of introspection. It's asking yourself, how do you want basketball to be played? What do you want Pitt basketball to look like? And if you had certain ideas about that in the past, are you willing to change those ideas? Are you willing to try something different? Are you willing to go in a different direction? These are questions Capel has to ask himself. And honestly, you know where it starts? He has to start with the question of, how did this happen? What were the things that caused this to happen? And he can't allow himself to use the Damian Dunn injury as a cop-out. He's got to look at it very realistically, like, how did this happen? And not just because Damian Dunn got hurt. And then once he comes to an answer on that question, he needs to figure out what he can do about it to make it better next year. And I don't know. I don't know what he's going to do. I don't know what he's going to say to those questions. I hope we get an opportunity to ask him. We certainly had a great conversation with him last summer that I think everyone enjoyed, and see if we can get another one of those this year, because I think people will be interested in hearing some comments from him. I know I would as well. All right. Pitt loses. The season ends. Panthers 17-15 overall, 8-12 in the ACC, plus 1 loss in the ACC tournament. Don't forget to like this video. You might not have liked what happened in the game, but you can like this video, though. We'd very much appreciate it. And be sure to subscribe to Panther-Lair.com on YouTube. It's youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. The subscribe button's right down there. You can see it. Click that little subscribe button. Click that little like button. We would very much appreciate it. We'll have lots of coverage from the ACC tournament right here on Panther-Lair.com. So keep an eye out for that. Thanks for tuning into this post-game show. We'll do more live streams. Of course, we'll have our live show tomorrow night, and then we'll have a morning Pitt tomorrow morning talking about Pitt basketball, lots of coverage from training camp, all kinds of things you could possibly need. Panther-Lair.com. Like and subscribe. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great rest of your Tuesday, and we will catch up with you tomorrow for the morning Pit right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.